everyone, I'm Wawa Gathero. I'm a climate advocate and the founder of Black Girl Environmentalist, and welcome to the very first episode of EDF's Climate Conversations Curated. Over the next 4 weeks, I'm getting together with very special EDF subject matter experts for down-to-earth conversations about climate solution pathways. This week, I am so excited to be able to be talking all about the clean energy economy with Elizabeth Gore, EDF Senior Vice President for Political Affairs, and Kyli Wagner, the Director of Defend Our Future. So let's jump right into it. Kyli, I'm going to be asking you the question first. So climate change is often called young people's lunch counter moment, and Gen Z is breaking through as the fastest growing voting bloc in the United States. So could you talk to us a little bit about the work being done at Defend Our Future and how you engage college campuses to advance a clean energy economy?
Of course. Young people understand that the critical threat to our communities is climate change because we have seen things get incrementally worse when it comes to the climate just within the span of our lives. So at Defend Our Future, we work with thousands of young people, including both Gen Z and millennials, to give them the skills and resources to advocate for clean energy solutions. So that includes providing opportunities to contact their legislators on key issues, training on how to organize and build power in their communities, and educating them on the importance of centering environmental justice in their advocacy. So across the country, we have student organizers who are working to bring even more people into the youth climate movement because we know it's going to take as much people power as we can build to win. They're working to educate their communities on the impacts of and the solutions to climate change, and then most importantly, holding their elected officials accountable for providing those solutions to protect their communities.
Thank you so much, Kyli. So the next question is going to you, Elizabeth. So recently, with the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, President Biden is now considered one of the most pro-environment presidents in history. Is that true? Can you tell us about the transition to clean energy and cars in a nutshell? How will we transition to clean energy, reduce inflation?
Well, thank you for those questions and for being with us. I'm really excited to be a part of the conversation. I can tell you one thing. President Biden is certainly the most pro-climate president that we've ever had before. He has ushered in a whole new era of both federal investments and also bringing along state and local governments, the business community, and the private sector in terms of creating an economy that is really on a trajectory towards 100% clean. So he gets a lot of credit for leadership across the whole political spectrum. And we're just delighted that he signed into law the Inflation Reduction Act, which puts us on a path to 50% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2030. Now, there's a couple of big pieces of this bill, which I'll just touch on briefly. There are tax credits for clean energy, solar, wind power, so that we can reduce the emissions coming out of the electricity sector. And then there's also investments in tax credits for electric vehicles. And that means not just cars and pickup trucks, but also buses and heavy duty trucks. Those vehicles have lots of emissions, and we're moving towards electrification of the whole transportation sector. And then the last thing I'll highlight is that the bill has a lot of provisions to build domestically to make sure that we have manufacturing and jobs right here in the United States. And so that as we shift to a clean economy, that economy is based on domestic supply lines and domestic manufacturing. And that helps rebuild communities. It helps create jobs. Now, you asked a little bit about inflation in particular. So let me mention a couple of things. Listen, clean power means that we are less dependent on the volatile price of fossil fuels. And that is good for American families and American consumers. So that's a really big part of getting households away from the from the ups and downs of international fossil fuel markets. It's also the case that clean electricity, the tax credits for making our electricity cleaner, the estimate is that that's going to save households up to $500 once the bill's fully phased in. So that's real dollars in the pockets of moms and dads that are trying to balance their checkbook at the kitchen table. And then the last thing I'll highlight is this bill includes credits for both companies and individuals that are trying to reduce their carbon footprint. So there's support for energy efficiency in homes, for heat pumps, for electric vehicles, and other cost-saving measures, and also for companies that are trying to reduce their carbon footprint in some of the credits that we've just talked about. So there's a lot here about doing more than one thing at once, lowering prices and lowering emissions. And that's one of the things that makes this bill stand out and makes me so excited about seeing it signed into law as we work towards implementation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. So the next question is for you, Kyli. Why is now such an important time for action at the federal level?
Yeah, well, to put it simply, now is the only time because everything that we love is at stake. So climate change touches every single aspect of our lives, from the health of our communities to even little frivolous things like coffee or avocados. And the opportunity for our generation and future generations to have a future in which everything can thrive is also at stake. So we don't have time to wait. And also in November, we'll elect a new Congress, and we don't know what that Congress will look like as of now. So we need to take advantage of the momentum that we have to address the climate crisis with the urgency that it deserves. And as Elizabeth said, that's already happening. We're at a moment in history when the biggest ever investment in climate change has been made. And it's thanks in part to young people across the world who were refusing to stay silent and have been holding our leaders accountable to protecting our future.
Absolutely. So on the topic of action on the federal level, Elizabeth, I'd love to hear from you and for you to tell us about the difference between the Inflation Reduction Act and the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, as a lot of people are talking about this, but I think perhaps some people get confused between the two. Now that Congress has passed the biggest legislation ever to address climate change, what's the next step to the transition to a clean energy economy?
Well, first of all, I just want to disagree a little bit with Kyli because she articulated that coffee and avocados are frivolous, which I completely disagree with. I think they're a really important part of living my best life. But let me talk a little bit about the bills that you mentioned. And let me start by saying climate change is a huge problem. And so we need lots of levers and lots of ways that we're attacking it and a lot of ways that we're fighting climate change. And when you look at these two bills, they very much complement each other, but they use different kinds of levers. They use different kinds of policies to push us towards a green economy. So the bipartisan infrastructure bill, it is very much focused on money that is spent by the federal government down through the state and local governments as well. So it's roads and bridges, but it's also electric vehicle infrastructure. It's also new transmission lines so that we can accommodate an expanded renewable energy portfolio. It cleans up ports, which are areas where you see high concentrations of pollution and often in frontline communities. The infrastructure bill updated infrastructure like lead service lines so that everybody can have clean drinking water in their household, no matter what their zip code is. And then the bill also provided funds for electric school buses, electric ferries, so that these big public purchases on these large transportation efforts are electrified and reduce emissions. So that's really the way that the focus of the infrastructure bill. The Inflation Reduction Act focuses, the tax credits and the provisions in that bill are more focused on individuals, on companies that are trying to reduce their emissions, that are trying to move us towards a green economy. There are investments, federal investments in the IRA, in the Investment Reduction Act. Most of those are around R&D, science, data, making sure that we have the infrastructure within the federal government to advance green energy projects. So we have enough people to permit offshore wind, so that we have enough people who can look at the opportunities for solar on federal land. So there's a lot of investments in lots of different areas. I think the most important takeaway is looking at these two bills together. They really cover the waterfront in terms of all of the different levers that we're going to need to fight climate change. And that's what makes it so exciting, is that we're not putting all of our eggs in one basket. We're really trying to have a broad brush in terms of how we're attacking this problem. And that's what we're going to need. Just as Kyli said, we're running out of time. And so we need to be moving all of these things forward at the same time.
Absolutely, absolutely. So for audience members that are listening and are feeling empowered by the words of you both, two amazing experts, and might be thinking, how do I act right now? What is some advice that you give to our audience members that are looking to take action?
I think it's really scary sometimes to think about the huge problem that is climate change. I think so much so that we have an entire generation that is dealing with climate anxiety. But the good news is that the number one way that you can combat your anxiety is to take action and to be involved and be part of something that's bigger than you. And we have the power to create the future that we want. That's where our hope lives. So if you want to keep up with the work that we're doing at Defend and find other people who are excited about organizing in their communities and raising their voices, the best way to keep up with what we're doing is to follow us on Instagram at Defend Our Future. And you can also go to defendourfuture.org to find more opportunities to take action.
And Kyli's a part of our EDF family, but let me talk about a couple of other ways. I'll also start out by saying I am inspired by the fact that we could get these two bills, especially the Inflation Reduction Act, signed into law. It was not that long ago when it looked like there was no chance that this was going to happen. And I give a huge amount of credit to grassroots advocacy, to those who were pounding on the doors of members of Congress, for those who were raising their voices. And that made a difference, and that brought this bill into being. And so everyone should feel a little empowered just by seeing this come across the finish line. And I hope that it does inspire people to take even more action, because there is more to be done. Now, Kyli talked a little bit about some of the ways to connect with Defend Our Future. For EDF, we have our own website, edf.org, and I would direct you there. And I would also direct you to EDF Action, which is the C4 partner that we have for EDF. A couple of other thoughts. One is, I hope everyone who hears this votes. The best way to impact policy is at the ballot box. And so that's another way that you can and should engage with the process and help to advance the climate agenda. The other thing I would say is there is more to be done on these bills that we've passed. There's a lot of implementation that is yet to happen. So don't feel like this is mission accomplished. We still have a lot more to do. And so I really encourage people to engage whatever's most comfortable for you and fits into your schedule to try and advance these and make sure that they are as equitable and as efficient and reduce emissions as much as possible as we look ahead.
Thank you both so much. And thank you for your leadership and taking the time to talk to the incredible audience that's tuning in. So Conversation 1 has come to an end, but we will be back next week to talk about environmental justice with Dr. Margot Brown and Vicki Patton. Become an EDF member and join the work being done at edf.org or join on social media. Whether it's a clean energy economy or environmental justice, EDF and their over 800 staff members around the world are working to ensure a vital earth for everyone. See you next week.